What's up, everybody? I'm about to be watching the Bricks and Minifigs Reckless Ben update, and I was just thinking, I keep up with this stuff. I'm constantly reading articles about all of this stuff, and I was just thinking, a lot of people post about it. There's a lot of controversy out there online, so I figured that I'd throw my hat in the ring, share my opinions on it. And of course, I just want to point out that anything that I say during this video, it's not going to be legal advice, it's not going to be legal counsel. It's just going to be all my opinion. And of course, nothing that I say reflects the values or the views of anybody that I work for or with. This is 100% my opinion. So we're just going to be giving an update on the Reckless Ben case. If you've been keeping up with it, it has been crazy. We have seen so many things. We've seen gag orders, we've seen TROs, we've seen filings, we've seen filings in the state court in Utah, and then also now in the federal court. So I decided, I'm keeping up with this anyway. I'm reading the articles, I'm watching the videos, so why not just throw my hat in the ring and share a little bit about what I think about all of this. So today we're going to be doing a little bit of analyzing of Legal Mindset's most recent video, Reckless Ben is Free to Speak. And I just want to preface this by saying that I hope that everybody is paying attention to what this means. Because the fact that this got filed first in state court and then Reckless Ben pulled it and then file it in federal court, I'm not going to jump and say that I can read his mind. I'm not going to say that I know his state of mind during this. But what I can say is, from my viewpoint, it seems like after everything happened the way it did in Utah with the Utah State Police, it seems like there's a good bit of there's a good bit of mistrust. There's a good bit of mistrust that I can see, in my opinion, with the Utah State Police. And who knows, maybe I'll be next. Maybe they'll throw a TRO or a gag order at me. But to say that someone isn't allowed to post videos or do investigative journalism, it's pretty crazy. In my opinion, it goes directly contrary to the First Amendment. And so I hope that everybody's paying attention to what's happening and also what the judge says. The decision that the judge just handed down on a federal level, it means a lot because they upheld essentially Reckless Ben's rights to freedom of expression, freedom of the press. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with this video. We're going to give some commentary. It's a pretty short video. It's only it's only 8 minutes, so not crazy long. I love that he is on the tower. Because the fact that he's on the tower is going to come up later, and for good reason.
Lego scandal involving Reckless.
So let's see what he has to say.
And Bricks and Minifigs over there in Utah. And this is actually a really big update because the federal judge has stepped in and thrown out the provision.
Yeah, I can't believe that Ben got arrested. Like, the fact that he got arrested for doing essentially investigative journalism is pretty crazy. Really interesting, that whole entire debacle of, okay, we do things differently here. I don't know what that means. As far as I'm concerned, there's only one law, and that law is supposed to be upheld. You have federal, of course you have federal law and state law, but you get the idea. There's federal law that allows for this type of stuff, allows for this investigation. So it's really interesting. But anyway, let's get back to the background.
He went up to that higher level. He went up to those different rules of procedure. So you're talking about a whole different ball game for Ben now, moving up into federal court, getting upgraded.
Yeah, this is pretty much what I was getting into earlier. Just the whole thing that he filed it in state court, pulls it out, sends it back to federal court, and then once it gets to federal court, on July 6, 2026, it was the U.S. District Judge David Barlow that allowed him to do commentary, investigative journaling. So this is a huge win for the First Amendment, like I was saying earlier.
Journalism. This is a massive win for the First Amendment, because if a business was allowed to continue to restrict somebody that's doing investigative journalism, that's doing commentary, they can essentially silence people that they don't want to say things. So essentially a company in the United States would be able to say, I don't like you. I don't like what you're saying. I'm going to go to a judge. I'm going to come up with some bunk story, some total BS, some sort of exaggeration. And based on that exaggeration, I'm going to silence you. I'm going to gag you. I'm going to put a temporary restraining order on you because of that the thing that I just made up. You'd be able to just pull it out of nowhere. And the judge here is saying, no, you're actually going to have to go to court. You're going to have to prove these allegations, right? Because Bricks and Minifigs has made a lot of allegations about Ben, saying that he is
with this originally. You know, in state court, it gets filed, and they say, look, you can't make any more videos. You can't do any more investigative journalism. And whenever you give out a verdict like that, you're essentially giving the green light to these corporations, these huge corporations, to shut people up. And that is so dangerous. You know, somebody might come at me and say, oh, slippery slope fallacy, slippery slope fallacy. One thing is going to lead to another, and then we lose, you know, freedom of speech. But no, I think that it's already happening. I think for someone to investigate, to give their findings of what occurred in real life based on interviews, articles, documents, even federal documents that we've seen that have now been disclosed throughout the litigation process. It's not like he was just throwing these allegations around. At least that's not how I feel. And I think that the judge also felt that way. He said, no, look, you guys have made tons of allegations against Ben too. So if you guys are going to file a lawsuit against him, like, you better have some proof. Like, did he do it wantonly? Did he do it maliciously? Did he lie on purpose? Or was this really his opinion? Was this really how he felt about things and he expressed that? Because that is directly protected under the freedom of expression in the First Amendment. So I think that that is a great example, and I think that the judge in this instance, he made the correct decision, I think.
Actor, that he's a bad person, etc. And because of that, they're now actually saying, no, you're going to have to prove that, and he is allowed to go out and do his thing and actually do journalism, which is, I think, a massive win.
Yeah, I mean, you should have to prove that. You should have to prove that he did it out of bad faith. If you're going to put a bad faith claim against him, you better be able to prove it. I mean, come on.
Reckless Ben's opinion here and exactly what he has been covering in this case and why it's so important that now he can speak. So let's hear his own words.
1 month ago, I was wrongfully silenced.
I am no longer allowed to even mention this mystery company.
But today, I got my freedom of speech back.
I have my freedom of speech back, baby.
Okay, I want to say real quick here, you know, and this is really good filming, and obviously, I mean, I think this looks like he actually climbed up a tower.
I already know where he's going with this. The trespassing. Yeah, the trespassing. Like, unless he just happens to own the tower, which more likely than not he doesn't. He's probably, I'm not going to say he is because I don't want to get all caught up in the allegations, but there's a good chance that he didn't get permission. Just knowing him and knowing who he is, like Reckless Ben, he's literally known as Reckless Ben. So you got to be careful, man. Like, once again, not legal advice, but in my opinion, you got to be careful, especially if you're under the microscope like this, which I'm sure he's going to get into. When you're put under the microscope in something so large that everybody is watching, you just can't. I mean, you have to be careful. And I don't know, man. You know, it's tough because I know, you know, you want to make a big statement. You want to be in the highest spot you can from the rooftops, you know, essentially metaphorically. But at the same time, you just have to be cautious about this stuff.
Or with a drone shot. But let me ask a question here. And this is the question I think a lot of people are thinking. Did you trespass to get up in that tower? Or did you have permission to go up in that tower, Ben? Here's the thing. And this is the thing that Ben's got to be careful of. Because Ben, he seems like a guy who goes out there and does it. It's in his name, Reckless Ben.
We knew that
but I'm looking at him on this tower,
right?
like, okay, if you're actually going out there and climbing towers, you gotta get permission to do that. You gotta go out there. I'm just saying that's the sort of thing that Ben's got to be careful of in the future, because Ben at this point is under a microscope. So he has to make sure he's not doing things like trespassing, like vandalizing, like harassment. He's got to be a journalist, right? He's got to put on the journalism hat and say, hey, I'm doing this from a journalistic standpoint, because the last thing you want to do is give your opponent, give them something to use against you. And that's just me being honest about the law on this objectively, because as you guys know, I always cover the objective law and try to be very fair when I'm analyzing these things. But let's hear what he has to say.
I can say whatever.
Yeah, that's the thing. You have to be careful because, I mean, you see it in personal injury lawsuits. You know, you have someone that's claiming that they're hurt, that they are not able to walk, that their life has been just extremely altered. And then you see them living a very normal life. You know, all the time defense firms hire private investigators to go take pictures, go take photos. And that's just for a personal injury case. You know, this is like national level news. This is a big deal. So you know that the spotlight is on him. You know that everybody's watching. So you just have to be careful. You know, I feel like this, I don't want to say it's a bad move by Reckless Ben, but at the same time, you know, you're kind of arming them a little bit, giving them something to use against you. As much of a statement I understand that he wants to make, you still have to be careful, right? You still have to be careful.
I want. I can say Bricks and Minifigs sucks. I can say Bricks and Minifigs sucks for old people. And look, I just said it. I'm not in jail, which is sick. We got our First Amendment right back. Yeah.
Episode 3 is
Yeah, and that's something he needs to be very careful of. So he can say, okay, now is, you know, Bricks and Minifigs steals from old people. He's implying about the theft of the Legos, but he's got to be careful about defamation and defaming these businesses and defaming the people at this point, because he's under a microscope now. So if he's going out there and defaming them and saying things that aren't technically true, calling them criminals on certain matters that maybe they aren't, maybe it was just them being dumb, maybe it was.
Yeah, he makes a great point. Like, you have to be, once again, I know that we just reiterate it time and time again, but you just have to be careful about the idea. You have to tiptoe around defamation. I mean, you're on a stage like YouTube, platform like YouTube, with a channel that, like he has, I mean, millions and millions of subscribers, and then you say, you know, they're crooks, they're criminals. When, yes, you feel like that, and yes, it may seem like that, but at the same time, if they haven't been convicted, or you're not sure that it's true, or you can't prove that it's true, that, I mean, you have to ask yourself, what I'm saying right now, the allegation that I'm making, is it fact, and could I prove that it is fact? And that is where you have to really, really ask yourself, can I? Is it, and can I, right? So once again, yeah, I know
Was a
kind
mistake.
of just it's reiteration. We've said it a lot. You have to be careful, man. You have to be careful.
And that's totally permissible. You can say they're, you know, horrible company. You can say all that sort of stuff. That's the First Amendment. That's what's awesome about this.
You can
and
say
being
that
able
they
to
suck
speak
and that
up
they're
and
horrible.
have an opinion, even
But when
though
you
it's
make, like,
negative. You should be able to have a
and
negative
claim
opinion
that they're
about
facts when
somebody.
you
But you
can't
do need to
prove
be
it. That's
careful
where you get into
for
really murky
stuff
waters.
like defamation, particularly when there's a lawsuit out there.
It's live right now on Patreon, so check it out. If you don't want to subscribe to Patreon, then you can always just wait until it's on YouTube in a couple days. But it's live, and also you can check out episode 4 coming very soon.
So really cool there news from Reckless Ben. Obviously, if you're over a fan of his Patreon, you know, get over there. I think that's a pretty smart business model to put his stuff up on Patreon a couple days early, and then, you know, people can go get that and have that released. That's pretty smart, actually, in terms of content creator strategy. So in my judgment, wrapping this thing up, Ben can now speak, but he has to proceed carefully. So he is in a situation where he needs to proceed very, very.
Yeah, so we're gonna stop it here because I just feel the same way. I feel the same way about all of this. When you're in a position like Ben, whenever you have eyes on you like Ben, you have to be so careful. You have a huge following. You can't just run around saying stuff, you know, giving allegations, making allegations. You have to be very careful and ask yourself, is this true and can I prove it? And even then, I would still think, in my opinion, that I personally would try to avoid that, because then you might have to actually go and prove that, and you never know. You know, you never know with the system. Someone might feel differently. They might feel that your proof isn't up to par. It doesn't really cut the standard. So you have to be really careful about what you say. He needs to be very careful about defamation. He needs to avoid, in my opinion, once again, this is just my opinion, not legal conclusions, really needs to avoid posting things like trespassing or anything that could get him in hot water or make his situation worse while the lawsuit's still pending. Really, in order to avoid future litigation, that's going to be critical. And yeah, I totally agree. with Legal Mindset's Last Judgment. This is a huge win for freedom of speech and the First Amendment. Anytime I see a case like this freedom of speech, First Amendment, it's such a big deal because, I mean, the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, so important. So many of our basic rights come from those 10, those big 10. So, no pun intended. So the first one, the First Amendment, you know, not that it's more important than any of the others, but it is the first one. And so anytime I see some sort of lawsuit, which most of the time lawsuits have to do with rights, especially freedom of speech, freedom of expression, I think it's so important. And I think that this is a demonstration. It demonstrates that we still can express ourselves. Doesn't matter how much money a corporation has, doesn't matter how much power somebody has, in theory, we can still turn to the courts. We are still seeing verdicts that respect and uphold the First Amendment, our rights to freedom of speech, freedom of expression. So it gives me a little bit of hope, a little bit of look into the current legal system, and it always makes me proud. Makes me proud that we have something that we can trust to enforce and also to weigh in whenever maybe law enforcement might fail. Which of course law enforcement's not all bad. Remember that. There's a lot of good people that are involved in law enforcement, a lot of good people in the service. But at the same time, every now and then when we turn to the courts, it's good to see that rights are upheld. So this was a big win for freedom of speech, freedom of expression, big win for the First Amendment. I'm going to do another video watching and reacting to Reckless Ben's statement about all of this, his findings, his investigation that ended up getting him arrested, ended up essentially making him the defendant in a lawsuit, a federal lawsuit. So obviously it must be really important what he has to say. We're going to watch that video, we're going to react to it. So thank you for tuning into this video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and whenever I watch the Reckless Ben video, I will also do a breakdown of that, and I appreciate you tuning in for the update. So thank you. See you on the other side.